when it was announced that they were going to do a follow-up series to Breaking Bad, I thought, oh, I don't know. Breaking Bad was so good, don't mess with it. And then said, well, it's going to be about Saul Goodman, so we're going to do a series called Better Call Saul, and it's going to be a comedy. And I was like, what? But all the fears that I had of what it might have been were immediately washed away once the show got underway, and it's a perfect companion to Breaking Bad. Well, nothing's perfect, of course, but still, it's the best of anyone's ability. This is it. There's been an awful lot of chasing prequels to all kinds of narratives and stories and whatnot. The popular, once beloved franchises, and they seem to get torn down by them. Saw I won't say the name, but it was a YouTube channel going on about how the Strange New Worlds is the best of prequels. That it's better than the Star Wars prequels, and it's the perfect prequel to the original Star Trek series, and that it's on par with Better Call Saul as the best prequel. It's just absolute garbage. It's just not true. One iota of that is not true. It's the only thing is that, yes, Better Call Saul is, as a prequel series, is right now the best that's ever been done, certainly in the current era, for this type of approach to storytelling. With the Star Trek thing, oh well, the guy had his sponsor was the Star Trek video game, so there you go, he had to shill for it. But that's another story. Better Call Saul, for all intents and purposes, as good as one can expect, achieved its job as far as Breaking Bad goes. And it was funny, but then so was Breaking Bad. It had a lot of humor in it. But I was thinking they were going to go full-blown with this sort of, this comical lawyer character that Odenkirk portrayed, and that would be the main point of it, and that it really wasn't going to follow any continuity narratives or what have you. But no, it's full on fleshing out this character. I suppose if you wanted to, and I don't suggest they do this, is that other characters could be explored further, but a lot of these characters are, and certainly with Mike and Gus, and they're fleshed out even more, even though for the most part you already knew their story, and yet it was still there was a lot of intriguing aspects to it, of just the guilt that hung over Mike, and that darkness that he was, and he couldn't get out of it no matter what he did. And here he's doing it for the love of his son, who was the cop he never really was, and he paid for it with his life. And now he has his son's daughter, his granddaughter, and he will do anything for her. And so that's his justification for going back into that world and being the criminal he had been. Of course, Gus, the ultimate revenge, and how much danger he was at risk at, and nearly loses. And yet, of course, you always knew he wouldn't. And yet, they managed to perform this and structure it to the point that it's all very satisfying as to how he survives to later on be destroyed by Walter White. Which he had to have thought, damn it. You mean after all that, the high school teacher does me in? Yeah. But for Saul himself, that had no idea where they would go. And in this interesting story about his whole origin and his relationship with his brother and all how that played out and how it haunts the whole show, even though his brother, killed himself and is long gone by the time you get to the end here. It's just, it's just that richness of it and depth to it maintains the narrative where you don't get so, it's like, well, I know how this is going, I know where it goes, everything blows up in his face and he's on the run and all that. And but no, these individual stories and the fleshing out of this character, and then of course Kim, sure, wondering, gee, I wonder where they all are, because a lot of these people are not involved in Breaking Bad, and of course you knew some of these were not going to survive, and certainly the ones more suspected of not surviving didn't, and then wondered if would Kim survive. Well, she does, But of course, the running theme about their romance and whatnot is that what attracted her to him was his con man persona, his his pranks and his naughtiness, and that really excited her. And their love was genuine. They were genuinely in love with each other, and it would go back and forth. I mean, there's it's subtle and whatnot, but there's scenes there where even Saul or Jimmy is taken aback by her aggressiveness in pursuit of the darkness, if you will. And so it was all very well done and interesting. And but eventually it blows up in their face with the death of Howard. And that was nothing like murder right in front of you. That shocks you to reality. And you got to stop fooling around, and how dangerous it all got, and he's still in that world as she leaves it. And she broke his heart when she left. She says, "I got to get away from you." And there's something to it. Is like, couldn't they have worked it out, and together they would no longer, be a part of that world or being involved with this criminal world and all that sort of thing. And perhaps, but for her, it's like Jimmy was like a drug to her, and she, and what attracted her and what that she probably felt was the excitement of his dark side is what would draw her to him. And if that was no longer there, would the relationship work? And I suspect perhaps that's how she felt about it. Whereas he was, no, stay with me, and perhaps she was wrong. Perhaps she, given him a chance as, to be on the straight and narrow, and that he would have worked harder for that, for her, but she'd leave him anyway, it wouldn't fade out. You just don't know. And she was a bit afraid of what future there would be after what had happened, and the shock of that. Perhaps, she didn't see it quite clearly as maybe she should have, but nevertheless, she's, I gotta get out of this. And so she does. And then we jump into the future, if you will, of Saul Goodman on the run. And he, of course, cannot resist the urge to set up schemes and plots. And ultimately, Carol Burnett turns him in. And it's almost like, oh, he's got one last little ploy to play. And would it have worked? I guess it would have shaved some years off for his final fate in prison, perhaps. It seemed to be that's what he was doing. But all for Kim, he decides to lay it out and fess up. No, this is what I did. And he did it. He did it for her, and they have their final goodbye. And that's the end of their love story. So it's one of these, that's the tragic doom when you have tragedies, is ultimately, well, they're doomed to die at some point, but also it's just this romance, and they'll, even though she's moved on and what have you, it's not, he was her one true love, and they'll never get that again. And that's the sad, tragic part about it. But he did commit the crimes, and he's going to have to pay for it, and there you go. So he doesn't end like Walter White, of course, but he does end. Even though he apparently is going to be a big hero in prison, they all knew who he was, and they were all proud of him and everything. So, he'll probably be all right. Of course, the cool cameos from Jesse Pinkman and Walter White, they came in and did some scenes. And those worked out, and especially the roundabout emphasis on Saul's interest in time travel, which they get back to it to where he does a scene with Mike, he does a scene with Walter White, and then finally his brother. And what was it? Well, he brought stuff for his brother, what he was doing to take care of him. And even though his brother said, "Look, I can get someone to do this," and he says, "Yeah, but I'm your brother. I'm supposed to do this." And all that went between them, it really shows his brother was the true villain of this story. But ultimately, the final thing is that he gives him a copy of H.G. Wells' Time Machine. So there you go. And if you could go back, what would you change, and all that sort of thing. And but yeah, he was kind of doomed from the start. But despite all his efforts, his brother didn't trust him, and his brother was jealous of him because he felt Mommy loved Jimmy better. You know, that's it. So, and but then perhaps at some point, his messed up psyche is what caused his bizarre obsession with electricity. Him supposedly having an allergy to electricity and all that is his own guilt tearing him apart about his complexes and lashing out at his brother for it or what have you. Possibility, I suppose. But all in all, excellent show. Enjoyed it. We'll miss it, but glad they ended it because you can't milk this for too much longer. Plus, the people were really aging out of their roles. It comes to us all. But for what it was, they did as good as they could to try to make it fit. And it's a nice package. So it'll be interesting to see what this crew does next. There were these ads about Interview with a Vampire. They're going to do a series of that. And I don't know who all's involved with it. I don't know if Vince Gilligan is. We'll have to look into it. Stuff like that. So it'd be cool to jump into something else entirely different once they, I guess, this should probably be the final endeavor into this world and close the book on it. And it was a good run. So there you go. There's a lot of disappointments these days, but this wasn't one of them. So if you haven't delved in, well, you've got a lot of shows to watch with Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad.